We used to scale by people. We have the ability now to kind of scale by technology at a very nice and convenient, right, low cost as we kind of move forward. So items like servicing today, often is handled by a person picking up the phone and answering a couple questions. We can throw, smart generative AI kind of interfaces in between them, help them answer quick questions, authenticate, and make sure that they get their answers taken care of immediately, while allowing kind of for the more personal touch points of humans, right, to interact, when needed necessarily. This goes on a B2C basis and also on a B2B basis.
Welcome back to the show. I'm your host, Ankur Patel, and with me today, I have Thomas Shah, who's the CMO and CTO at LS Mortgage. Thomas, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
Well, great. Well, on this show, we really love to dig into the origin story. So would love to learn a little bit more about LS Mortgage and also how you got to the role that you are in today.
Yeah, Lone Stream Mortgage is part of a larger organization called OCNBC. We're a wholesale lender, direct-to-consumer lender, commercial lender, nationally licensed, and we've been around since 2006, right, as an organization. I've been with the organization for about 5 years, and I have a really unique role at the organization where I'm both Chief Marketing Officer and Chief Technology Officer. So with that, I get, not only the grand responsibility, but also kind of the, I guess you might say, exciting part where I get to work with our customers and clients, but also turn that into technological solutions that work through the back ends of our systems to make us better, right? Quite frankly, from a customer experience standpoint, and also from a expense management and revenue generation standpoint.
I love that, Thomas. We typically don't see that, like a CMO and a CTO in one, right? But I think you're absolutely right. I think some of the greatest applications of AI and technology in general is enabling more revenue. And being on the technology side and being on the marketing side, you're close to kind of both sides of the coin. So maybe let's just chat a little bit about how you got to be in that particular role. So we could kind of go through maybe quickly your background prior to this, and what led you to kind of be able to essentially wear two very distinct hats in one role.
Yeah, exactly. It's sure. Quite frankly, my background is more on the marketing side, right? Quite frankly, for the past 25 plus years, working in mortgage finance, advertising agencies, digital marketing, et cetera. As marketing has gotten more technical, over the past 10, 15 years, so my skill set has grown. And so working with IT teams and being kind of partnered side by side with CIOs, CTOs at previous companies has allowed, more success really for the organization when myself and that CTO or CIO really pair together and work to accomplish items. As I came to Lone Stream, there was a vacancy really in the information technology area, and that's where I started to provide leadership. And we decided that kind of discipline should really roll under me during this time, and maybe in the future we'll get another person in the future to kind of take over. But we really built out really our teams to have the experts that we need, not only in infrastructure, networking, cybersecurity, et cetera, but also, within data analytics, business intelligence, specific development, et cetera, so that from a marketing perspective, we can still manage our marketing appropriately, strategically, but then tie that into the information technology side and provide kind of leadership on the technology side that's different rather than really just in, quite frankly, maintenance within the organization, right? Sometimes that is looked at.
Yep. No, absolutely. I agree. And I'm curious sort of how, before, let's say, Gen AI, before some of the latest things on the AI side, how that's shifted and changed, right? Because I think it used to be that a lot of the client experiences were driven primarily through talking to real people. And then I think over time, there were different chatbots that have emerged.
Sure.
And I think in some ways, people's expectations have changed because, in 2006, I imagine not a whole lot of smartphone usage. iPhone hadn't come out yet. But once the iPhone and other smartphones really became mainstream, I think customers really wanted more digitally native experiences to engage. So could you just walk us through maybe some of the technological inflection points you've seen in terms of customer engagement over the years, including the advent of some of the chatbots we've seen?
Yeah, absolutely. In mortgage lending, it tends to go through ebbs and flows depending on how the industry is kind of running. During downtimes, we tend to actually lose technology. To be honest with you, we have companies close. Innovative technology companies do lose their footing, and we get set back as an industry sometimes around that. And that's why often you'll see that the mortgage lenders that are out there, with the exception of few who are very technical. Technologically advanced, such as Quicken and others, often the smaller organizations kind of fall behind significantly. What we've seen since 2016, 2018, 2019 is the ability really for smaller lenders, originators to kind of pick up and kind of run with that new technology and kind of advance it into their system. So where we used to scale by people, scale by call centers, et cetera, we have the ability now to kind of scale by technology at a very nice and convenient, right, low cost as we kind of move forward. So items like servicing today, where servicing, often is handled by a person picking up the phone and answering a couple questions. We can throw, smart generative AI kind of interfaces in between them, help them answer quick questions, authenticate, and make sure that they get their answers taken care of immediately, while allowing kind of for the more personal touch points of humans, right, to interact, when needed necessarily. This goes on a B2C basis and also on a B2B basis, right? So we're able to kind of take whether it's support or even just general kind of questions and answers, where whether it's consumers or it's mortgage brokers who we work with quite frequently, trying to understand our programs and guidelines and asking specific questions, so we can provide answers back very quickly about the type of loans that we can do, or possibly even the credit scores that we do underwrite to, without them having to search through mountains of paper, right? Or even a website, or trying to find it specifically on a website someplace. And so those quick Q&A can help them also get answers back to their customers and clients, or help them kind of make a decision, right? And keep us in their kind of decision set for the future.
That's incredible. I think you're saying it's at the beginning of the journey and the end of the journey. So beginning meaning it's prospective customers that come online and have questions that want to get answers without having to read a lot of the documentation that they would have to pour through. And then on the servicing side, they may have questions that they want to answer to. Again, eliminate some of the need for human interaction, at least for some of the simple questions. You're saying that Gen AI has an opportunity on that side as well. So maybe let's talk about those two components. Customers or prospective customers that are interested in some of the products you have to offer. How have you been able to leverage Gen AI to deliver more conversational experiences there? Starting from getting the data into a format perhaps that large language models, for example, could work with.
Right. And that's always the challenge, right? Trying to identify the correct data to kind of get into those, LLMs and get it vectorized, or set up semantically so that you have it connected, right? Our journey kind of to do that was first identifying really where do we feel pain, right? Where do we feel a lot of uh, that information debt in a lot of ways that's not getting out? How do we get that back to our customers in a meaningful, quick way? Once we identified what those were, those areas, we started to identify the fact that we could take either current data that we had, modify it a bit, possibly put it into FAQs, Q&A, and then use some of our resources that we have on our platform to ingest those and start playing and asking questions and seeing if we got the correct answers back. We only release items that have been tested fully. We only release data that has been scrubbed completely. And we're very cautious about security, as well as kind of the experience that the consumer or client will get when receiving that data, to make sure it's accurate, because inaccurate data is kind of it was really the most harm that we could do to ourselves and to the possible borrower or client. But I will add, Ankur, that we've got, kind of like the next phase of this that we're seeing a lot of kind of lenders go into is this automated kind of underwriting kind of phase, where now we're
Okay.
taking the combination of information, right, kind of from our back end that maybe we were providing to customers, but a more detailed version of that, their information, which might be income appraisals, uh, flood documents, other income documents, bank statements, pulling that all together to really underwrite a loan, right, fully based on our guidelines and rule set, and watching that occur, and then actually watching conditions come out of that, saying, "Well, that's great. You gave that to us. We actually need maybe one or two more pieces of documentation, and here it is that we need to receive." And that phase is a large step, quite frankly, for lenders to kind of move to that area, because today we underwrite with people, and people are very important. But quite frankly, to underwrite alone and to make it faster and make the experience better, leveraging the technology is going to be huge, and lenders that move towards that way will reap the rewards of that in the future.
Great. No, I think I love that vision. And I will say, I think you are much, much further along than almost anyone I speak to, which it's, I think it's incredible, Thomas. I think that like speaks to the volume of effort and just awareness and capability that you've demonstrated in moving the organization in this direction, right? It's not easy to navigate, not only in terms of the kind of the security side, but then in terms of actually having this work well in a mission critical environment like this, right? So maybe let's talk about the conversational components first, though. It seems like you were able to take data that's relevant, create embeddings out of that data, and then introduce it. What was the QA process? I'm very curious what that will look like, because I imagine the initial step is you want to make sure it works well with internal users. And then once you have comfort there, and this is the scary part for most organizations, then you can kind of make that available for end users to use. So do you have any advice for our audience that's looking to build something similar in this space?
Yeah, we take a couple paths when we look to the data that we're going to ingest first. So the first step is really saying, what are the questions being asked or that aren't being answered, right? And then
Mm-hmm.
what data supports that? So we kind of start there, Ankur. And then we move to, like you said, the QA process, which is, well, now we're going to ask the same question. Do we get the same answer? But then we ask the question different ways, right? And then we ask the question kind of
Yeah.
indirectly. Or we find different ways to ask it. But then we also pull from other similar questions that have been asked by our clients in different way, because we do have a record of those in our, call it our ticketing systems or other systems that come in. And so it's very it's not easy, but it makes the process easier than trying to generate kind of some of those questions on your own. So you can go back and see, okay, well, here's what our human, kind of associate gave back to that person. What would our system give back in this case, right? What would the answer be? And would they be, better, worse, or the same? And, kind of see how that process kind of unfolds as we go forward. It's not, quite frankly, sometimes not a quick process, but we do have kind of our experts working on it and testing, kind of those questions on a regular basis. And then there's the iteration factor afterwards. So when you go out and you do release it, for us, we do have parts of our organization that we can release these to. So we don't release it maybe globally, but we start in one area and we see how it performs. And then we add to it, iterate, and then we broaden it out as we kind of go forward. Our teams then actually, quite frankly, see the use in this, and they say, "Oh, that's great." And we task them with actually looking at the responses that come back, and then helping us improve them. Right, so they'll go back and actually update the content for us if we do find incomplete answers or something that's being generated that maybe isn't acceptable. Right, kind of in that format. So it's a regular process of kind of rinse and repeat, right? Every time you kind of go through it, but once you get it out there, it's you'll start to see the benefits, and we tend to see we're seeing now 20-25% of our basic kind of inquiries getting handled by our generative AI kind of conversational bots.
Great, great. Yeah, I love that. It's like iterative experimentation to make sure that there's comparison between AI generated responses and then human responses. And if it's similar to or better than human, then it's ready to go live, right? And then you kind of expand the scope and make sure that this, I'm sure most banks won't say this, but sometimes the answers that people give are wrong, right? So it's
Yes,
not like the current system is perfect either. So you
right.
have to take that into consideration. Yeah, I think that's exactly right. So, and then in terms of users and what users expect, do they want, for example, context or some explainability as to the answer, or do they typically just want the answer? They don't care really how you got there.
So we tend to find, customers, clients really just want an answer. They want an answer. They want a little detail behind it, but right? There are a portion of the customers that say, you know what, I need a little more, and that's when we escalate it off into a human, right, to kind of
Definitely.
take over from there, because of sensitivity of the data or the information that we deal with, NPPI, et cetera. It can require further authentication, or it could require, um, you know, a more involved discussion and Q&A than kind of our generative AI bots are able to kind of handle at this point. Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. Well, I think it seems very clear that on the conversational side with chatbots and such, you've adopted a lot of great applications, some that are RAG based, so retrieval augmented generations to help with those conversations. You mentioned underwriting, so I'm curious where in the journey you are with that process. Is that still something experimental that you're looking to go and develop for eventual inclusion in some sort of production setting? Or have you found some ways to get some of the underwriting process more automated with generative AI?
Yeah, it's funny. The industry itself has gone through this transformation of over the past 2 years, getting really over the past 8 years. Looking at OCR information, so to speak, and trying to convert that into digital data, verification by humans, et cetera. Often using both onshore and offshore kind of folks. But in the past 2 years, we've seen now the evolution of the ability to take that data very accurately and quickly and transform it. So let's talk about bank statements for a second. Bank statements are tough because bank statements are uh, different across different banks, right? If you think about all the different accounts you have, checking versus savings
Yep.
versus one bank versus another versus maybe three or four banks. They could be labeled differently. Bank statements could be put in different orders. They could be put in out of date, deposits, etc. So often bank statements are used in mortgage lending to calculate income. And
Yep.
calculating income can be very difficult, time consuming for an underwriter to do. Uh, but now the tools are here by which we can calculate them fairly quickly and not take an underwriter's time, which is typically high priced time, and move it over right into a way where they're more or less reviewing the result rather than taking on the actual action of calculating that income. And then to kind of answer
Yeah.
your question, right, is okay, so where is everybody even now? Where are they moving to? And now they're moving to, well, we're able to now calculate those bank statements or those incomes, or take the data off of the documents in a contextually intelligent way, right, and kind of transform it into digital data that we can consume. Well, now we can put that together, right, with rules and kind of make decisions based on it. And that's where, we're moving to in that journey. And this year we'll deploy something around that, right, that will help us definitely probably improve what we're working on from an underwriting standpoint, improve our overall process. Um, and other lenders, I'm sure, will as well, right, that are out there today. So it's not going to be a big secret, and we're going to see the whole industry transform over the next 3 to 5 years as technology becomes more and more just available, right, and also cost
Yeah.
effective. Yeah.
I mean, I think that's a great example you brought up. Bank statements 2, 3 years ago, it would have required annotating, so labeling tens of thousands of bank statements to build a classical ML model. Now, with large language models coupled with OCR, you can kind of do that with much less effort. Accuracy, of course, is very important, and there are ways to go and make sure the accuracy is super high. But with that extraction and coupled with rules-based approaches, you can calculate a lot of the things you need to inform the underwriting process, so the underwriter is picking it up at a later point in time. It's like introducing a calculator or a computer to a set of people that were doing long form math, so on paper. I like that analogy
Right.
because it's,
Yeah.
it's not that they're not getting to a different result. They're just getting to the same result much faster. And basically, if you have a calculator, why would you choose to do long form math on paper, right? It's very similar.
Agreed. Yeah. When you think about kind of the use of human resources, right, we always want people to perform their best in their highest use, right? And doing math is great, but like you said, the calculator is great, but if I can get that calculator operate on its own, I'd
Yeah.
love my our people to have better kind of work quality experience, and make an impact on the organization rather than spend their time adding up bank statements, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's right. The more you could kind of take the grunt work, so some of the intensive work, pulling data out and calculate ratios and some of the things that they need, the better it is. It impacts the work life or the quality of work that they're doing in those roles, right? So
Yeah,
I think that's
absolutely.
right. Um, a question for you, before generative AI, did you have any document processing or automation software? So, typically like for bank statements, you hear like Acrolis or some other player.
Sure.
I'm curious if you had anything in place, or this was like a net new initiative for you once large language models became much more prevalent.
No, we use companies like Acrolis, right, for bank statement calculation, right, that assist us with that, or double check our work, right, one of the two.
Yeah.
So that it not new to the industry, as you know, but it is something that we needed to utilize, quite frankly, because we are a top non QM lender, and bank statements, are one of our largest programs that we have.
Yeah. So you're able to basically use external vendors for some of the areas, and then how much of it, and how do you decide basically which components to build in house using your resources versus choosing external vendors for some of this work? Because there are lots of ways to go and break the underwriting workflow into smaller segments, and you could choose to go and do it all in the house, or you kind of find best in breed vendors for the different components, and then you have your engineering team kind of stitch that together for what you need.
Yeah, it was a personal journey for me, trying to kind of unravel that, quite frankly. I think I spoke with so many peers, so many third party sources like Gartner and others, um, you know, uh, smart people like yourself, right? Just trying to get a sense of not only where we were, but what it took, right, to kind of get
Sure.
from A to B or A to B to C. And, we're kind of ultimately, we kind of landed, and I did some of this with my team, is we really figured out that first we had a lot of the resources offered by some of the foundation that we work on today, through Microsoft, right? Because we work with Microsoft. They've got a great platform. We identified what the limitations kind of that platform are, and we identified also where the limitations of our team are, and also time to market. So we identified several different
Mm.
areas, critical areas. Hey, what can we do ourselves? What can we leverage vendors kind of quickly to offset some of the issues that we have that we think are issues where we think actually we can kind of leapfrog the competition, but also provide a better customer experience immediately. And then where can we take our time a little bit and get it right, and build not only the expertise in house, but also build on a platform, learn, and provide value to the organization, right? Where are those critical areas? And in identifying those, we really kind of came up with really our plan, which was, we're gonna build here, we're gonna buy or migrate here, and then learn a little more on the side, right, as we kind of figure it out. And quite frankly, our team is really excited about that, because our team, we have developers, we have other technology professionals who haven't been trained in this, right, but are very excited about it. They're willing to spend the extra time to kind of learn and understand and test, and that's what's going to, kind of brings a little bit of entrepreneurial spirit to our department and company, right, which allows them also to think about other areas that can be impacted by this. And so far, it's been pretty good, because now we can talk to vendors in an educated way, because we built some on our own, but we've also been able to kind of sort through a lot of the different, I would say, offerings that are out there, and identify where we need kind of the help versus the help that's offered, right? Which a lot of times I think a lot of people are going to get thrown upon them, whether in email or calls, and that, hey, we do everything in AI, we'll come help you and automate your whole system. Well, that's not really true. What it is, right, is kind of different variations of what everybody's calling AI. And so sorting through that
Yeah.
and understanding it is very key, right? So where to start, right, and where you can kind of make the most impact. And that for us has been really our journey to date. Yeah.
No, I think that's great. I think what you did was you explored all the available tools on the market that you could use at your disposal, including Microsoft, and you took in the stock of your existing team and what their capabilities were and are, and then also how quickly you wanted to move, and then it's like learning also from external vendors. Every single call, every single interaction is a means for your team and your company to learn. So even if it doesn't work, it's one step closer to getting something that does work, and then basically once you have a good lay of the land, once you've experimented a good bit, you know what are the things you want as part of your kind of production deployment, and so you're able to kind of stitch that together, right? And then over time, those gains are compounding, right? All of a sudden, something that seemed very hard to automate, like really from end to end, you've been able to automate a good bit because you've been able to break that down to smaller components and
That's
then
right.
experiment, iterate, and then kind of land some of those components in the mix. Um, I want to turn to a kind of a point that's related to this, which is super important, which is even when you have AI that does some degree of automation, let's say it's for underwriting or for the chatbot conversational example, the tricky thing is to figure out when should you actually turn it over to a human. In a chatbot, it might be easier because person can just ask, hey, like I actually want to talk to a human agent, or they're asking for a clarification that the chatbot couldn't deal with. But in the underwriting process, um, how do you manage that handoff between the AI maybe skipping a step versus handing it off to a person to go and review?
Yeah, they're a combination of ways, and it all has to do with risk and the risk you're looking to examine, right, within each of the kind of categories that you're underwriting to. So, for example, let's say you're ingesting data around appraisals, right? Obviously, there's probably some data in that maybe doesn't need human intervention, but the system itself, if you design the system correctly, you'll know either data that needs to be looked at, data that countermands maybe what you already know. Right. For example, if your client tells you, "Hey, my appraised value is 200,000," but you get back an appraisal that shows 4 million, right? There might be something incorrect, right? Maybe in the data that a human needs to kind of take a look at. So we're looking at a combination of variance, and we're also looking at a combination of what some of the cognitive tools are telling us that are confidence indicators, right? So we're looking at those confidence indicators also. And those confidence indicators have been kind of tweaked and precision tuned to a certain extent, and we start with a wider kind of confidence interval and then kind of tune it in as we go forward. So we look for items that we say to the human. Again, kind of in an appraisal example, a lot of these values that were brought in today meet within the kind of the confidence interval that we expect, right, for document data like this. They also match maybe what was expected to a certain extent, what you put on the application or estimated values. You can accept them or you can go in and just double check them, right? And so a lot of times if we've done our job right, then really what we're looking at is anomalies rather than verifying all of the data and rechecking it, right, after time. And so underwriting kind of follows the same thing. So each piece of data around that, whether it's income, appraised value, certain conditions, kind of follow the same suit also. And then, of course, your rules data is the other part of it that needs to kind of be watched. And so for us, there's going to be a combination of product manager who does manage kind of rules and output. And then there's going to be QA that's kind of looking at both, the human underwrite as well as the AI underwrite, and compare the two and see, make sure that the end result is what we expect, and then also break it down into pieces so that we understand, where there might be flaws in the system as we go through it. So if you need me to dive into that more, I can, but I tried to kind of keep it high level for you.
No, I think that makes sense. I think there are ways to identify where the model might have gotten something wrong, right? So it's like
Yeah.
an anomaly detection or error detection, and you could kind of go and create some proxies for confidence scores and such too. So I think there's some interesting things you could go and engineer to kind of go and figure out how confident the model truly is versus versus what you need it to be, and then you're able to kind of relay that. And as long as people are kind of the final decision makers, there's some review process. Then all of a sudden, you could have this like really kind of work for internal productivity because it's not going and making a final decision necessarily, at least not today. So I think that helps de-risk applications like this for a lot of businesses. So I want to turn it over to the impact of this underwriting. So I'm curious, at this point, how much of the volume you do today is being automated either partially or fully by AI, and then what has it enabled for the business, either in terms of like cost reduction or faster turnaround times that perhaps ultimately impacted the revenue side of the house?
Yeah. I can't share exact, but I can tell you that,
Sure.
quite frankly, there's definitely a portion that is being, automatically driven, right, by some sort of AI tool, right, within it today. Moving to, kind of a more full, getting 80, 90% version of that in the future is coming, right, for us. So today, it's really working on the parts and pieces, kind of getting those, like we talked about. Bank statements
Yeah.
is a good example of one of those. Appraisals is another good example of one of those, where those pieces are being automated and pulled together. So a lot of our pieces are getting put together in such a way so that the automated underwriting piece can really kind of come in full circle and uh, you know provide even more value over the top. But we're seeing today, I mean, we can cut down days in the process back from a year or two ago, just in several different proportions, and that goes to ingesting appraisals. Instead of it taking 2 days, now we're doing it in a matter of hours, right? And ingesting bank statements, again, instead of taking it multiple days, it's less than a day. And then
Yeah.
whether it's indexing documents and such like that, which are all kind of basic items, those get done, I mean, those knock time off of kind of what the organization and origination of a file. So where a file might have taken 45 to 60 days in the past, now all of a sudden you're down to sometimes 20 days or less in some cases, depending on the program type and file, which not only benefit to the organizations, it benefit to the consumer and our clients at the end of the day, because now you're no longer waiting so long sometimes, whether you're purchasing a home or even refining a home, sometimes to get through that process or even just to get a decision. And so that, quite frankly, is a benefit to everybody.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. I think for last year and then this year with clients, we've been able to build out extraction for dozens and dozens of documents. And I think what that enables is that pieces of the document review that are normally involved in the mortgage process now no longer require human effort because you can automatically classify and extract values from those documents, which then when you pull those values out and you put them into the rest of the underwriting workflow that typically our clients have some version of, it makes that process run smoothly. So the input into those engines is just easier, requires a lot less human effort. And the underwriters are able to kind of pick up the activity much later down the pipe, which shaves off, as you said, days in the process. Sometimes it could be weeks, depending on what type of lending you're doing and the queue
Sure.
that's built up. But
Yeah.
you're getting faster turnaround times. I mean, this is a huge impact to client experience, but more importantly, because there's a decay function around sort of how quickly you get back to clients, it allows the business to capture some of that revenue, which is, it's being lost. It's frankly lost revenue because of just how slow the process is. And so it's a huge revenue enabler. I think a lot of companies look at this as like a cost reduction play, which is of course part of it, and it's probably easier to quantify. But it is revenue impacting at the end of the day.
Agreed. Are your clients seeing, as they shave those days off, are they seeing better kind of client retention over the longer term? Is that something that's been explored? I know it's something we're very interested in, but we haven't explored it yet, but we think there's going to be a huge impact there.
Yeah, so they do see. I think it's hard to kind of measure retention just because it's been early on. But what they are seeing is that they deliver better client experience. It stands out from the pack, right? So all of a sudden, clients have a much better introduction to the brand and to the bank, which
Yep.
is really vital. But these clients are actually introducing a newer capability, which is once the mortgage is originated, they have the mortgage. They introduce like what you said, which are conversational experiences, which allow them to get data on the mortgage pretty quickly, right? So sometimes the question is as simple as like how much principal or interest is remaining, or when is the next payment due,
Yeah.
or who owns the mortgage, especially if the mortgage is being sold in like past to other entities because some of it's being sold off. In a simple questions that people want, that they don't want us to go wait for their statement to come in the mail. They don't want to have to go call their mortgage broker or a mortgage originator
Yep.
to go and answer. We're able to kind of give those conversational experiences. And we do that on two fronts. The big thing for us is unstructured documents, which we talked about, but it's also querying data from databases, which I think I don't think gets enough attention, frankly, which is you can get text queries that are get converted into SQL statements. They operate on structured data, which is clean for the most part that our clients have built up over time, and then it's able to retrieve like numerical data from those tables in the ways that clients want, right? So now all of a sudden that data doesn't have to be in some sort of unstructured document or semi-structured document like a statement. You could
Yep.
go directly to the data store itself.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's, gosh, that is such a huge impact, when you can do that, and you can do it in a very secure way. I think the results you could see are just amazing when you get that out of that. We haven't implemented to that point yet. Excited to do so, but I think that's kind of that for us. That'll be another huge leap forward when we can do that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm curious to see sort of over time how much that helps your business, like because you've been so early basically you've been really great at adopting all the newer tech. Whereas like some of the banks we talk to are a little bit more. They want to move more methodically. They're slower and
Yep,
generally moving for many reasons. Partly sometimes they're much larger and they're more complex, and the decision making
absolutely,
is bogged down a little bit with process.
sure.
But it is in some ways like the advent of the internet. Like at some point, if you don't catch up fast enough, you will have to basically you have a harder time catching up, right? Because you'll lose some market share, and that ends up being a wake up call. It's like, okay, you could be risk averse, you could be aware of how much risk you take and when, but eventually, like you will need to take some form of risk here in terms of like going and trying and testing and adopting,
Yeah,
because you'll
agreed.
be losing some market ground to the players that are gaining or are adopting this technology.
Yeah, agreed. Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
Are there a lot of security kind of concerns? I think from those larger banks, I'm sure there are, right? Especially when it comes
Yeah.
to right authentication, et cetera. How do you guys see them handling that? I mean, how are they? What kind of questions are they asking about your technology?
Yeah. This is a great question. I mean, it's a topic that's so important. I think the largest banks they are very keen on Gen AI, but because they are such large brands and they're in the public eye, they don't want to get this wrong. So they are like eager and open to Gen AI, but they don't allow many things. They don't allow, for example, and I can understand this, but they don't allow the use of ChatGPT internally.
Yep.
They're just finally like because Microsoft has established a name for security, they're starting to use Microsoft Copilot, but
Yeah.
they haven't really started working with even like an Azure OpenAI, right? Certainly not working with open source large language models, even though if deployed on their infrastructure, the data would never leave their walls. They just don't want to get this wrong because the regulation right now is murky, and they don't want to be caught on the wrong side of the regulatory environment. And they also don't want the reputational risk of something goes wrong. And one of their clients makes a big deal about it. Some news article that pops up naming that X bank got this wrong. You can
Right.
imagine it carries like it'll go on the airwaves, and they will now become a poster child for Gen AI going wrong. So they'd rather not be that, and then they'd rather let regulation kind of emerge so they know what's black and white. And they also want to make sure that other banks are adopting Gen AI. And so they feel like, okay, well, now they're just doing something that everyone else is doing. So there's very much a herd mentality when it comes to
Absolutely.
this. And I can understand it because of how large the brands are and how visible the brands are in the public eye.
Yeah, I get it. It's like playing not to win in some cases. Kind of like I'm trying to be on the field, but I'm trying not to score. Right, right. Kind of in some ways. I mean, I get it. I totally understand. I know one of our key caveats when we got started on this was that data can't leave our systems. It's got to be within kind of our walled city, so to speak. Um, and let's operate from there, right? And kind of see where we go. And can we operate with tools and technology that we understand? Um, got to be a little careful about bringing anything outside in, but make sure that's vetted right appropriately. And so it's tough, right? Because when you don't know what you don't know, it's real easy sometimes to kind of blow the whole thing up, and that can be careful. Yeah, you got to be careful. I get where
Yeah.
they're coming from, but there's also a point where you got to jump, right? So
Yeah, exactly. And our recommendation, this is how we operate with clients, is that we build everything on their infrastructure, whether it's a VPC or virtual private cloud or on-prem, and it's open source models. It's deployed on their Kubernetes with GPUs, so no data is leaving their walls. Like everything's intact. The fine tuning we do with the models is done on their data. It's not shared with anyone else. Like none of that leaves, right? So it's as secure as you can be with these models. And we also recommend that it's primarily for internal use, not external client use, at least not in the early days, because we want them to develop trust in the system.
Agreed.
That everyone from kind of the people that are like interfacing with clients, we want them to develop trust in the systems. We want the business leaders and operators that are higher up in the rung to also build trust before they kind of take a leap of faith and do a little bit more on like the user facing applications. What is a little bit surprising to me is imagine you have a set of vendors that you've kind of already onboarded them, you work with them, and they're the ones that are adopting Gen AI, and maybe they're using Gen AI as a SaaS offering to the bank. So all of a sudden, it's not like you're introducing a new Gen AI vendor or a Gen AI model into the mix, but your existing vendor set is now adopting this. And how do you deal with that? Because that's product innovation through Gen AI from a vendor that wasn't like a Gen AI native. So that's kind of also a gray area right now.
Yeah. Yeah. Agreed. And that is tough. And then there becomes, definitely for banks and for, lenders, we have vendor, as you know, vendor approval processes, et cetera, and different hoops they need to jump through. Right. And so adding, kind of how they implement and work with Gen AI is really something new that we started asking a lot of our vendors and where they apply it, because we need to know, right? Like where's it being applied within your systems so that we can understand how it's reaching us and how it's impacting the data that we receive from you, kind of at that point as well.
Yeah, I think there will be an industry standard here at some point, which is like just like SOC 2 is standard. There'll be a standard around like what are the best practices on Gen AI, and you should get certified, and there are tests, and you need to provide evidence and such around this. I think that just doesn't exist yet, but the sooner we can get there, I think the better, because then everyone will know what the black and white areas are around the use of Gen AI. Whereas right now it's like ill defined, and I think that actually creates reason to not move in any of this direction, whereas that clarity would allow them to move with a little more confidence.
Yeah, that makes sense. Agreed. Yeah, agreed.
Yep. So, in the few minutes that we have, I'm curious where you think the big Gen AI applications are. It could be at your company or it could be in the broader industry. But what are people not talking quite about that you're starting to get interested in on the application side? So, introducing in different parts of the business that our audience should learn about.
Yeah, I think, whenever even within our organization, but even outside of it, when we talk to whether it's our peers or adjacent kind of verticals, a lot of it's around chatbots, and while that's great, right? I think
Yes.
looking further and deeper, right, needs to kind of be the approach, and that's really just the skin, right? That's a start,
Yeah.
and it's a great place to get your feet wet, and it's a great place to start understanding how data can work and transform, and how the LLMs work, all that kind of great stuff. It's great to understand structure through a chatbot, but then there's so many different avenues you can kind of take that out. I mean, the things that I tend to kind of get interested in, kind of from that, are the the automated decisioning from the data that kind of comes from a lot of
Yeah.
those automated systems. So where can we make those automated kind of decisions, or provide even kind of better business intelligence kind of around that, right? Whether it's reporting or anything else. Today that's another piece for us, like from a business intelligence standpoint, that while we got great kind of business intelligence, we can take it further. I think
Yeah.
with some of the ways that as we call AI, can be kind of applied to that, especially within the platforms that probably already exist at a lot of mid-level companies and above, right? And it's a great place to kind of start and kind of play, but ultimately, kind of getting input from your partners and vendors and those who know can help steer you where you can make the most impact is going to be good. I think that business intelligence is going to be great, because also that business intelligence is also going to tell you where you can countermand and apply kind of those AI projects and opportunities, right, in the future. So it's going to feed itself, right, as you go forward. So I think, and then, quite frankly, companies will need to look at building out the discipline to a certain extent, people who understand it, and not just business leaders, but really somebody or a few people within that help plan strategy for the organization and work with knowledgeable folks like yourself, right? That kind of help guide, other department leaders and business executives kind of through the future. Because it is an area that is very specific. It's an area that's growing. It's an area that gets very technical very fast, and it's fantastic and it's exciting, but also you can get lost in it if you're not, if you don't have the right kind of guide. So, it's great talking with people like you who just know, have been doing it for years and kind of know the evolution and know what's going on, and those kind of interactions I value a lot, and I think others would too.
No, I think that's exactly right, Thomas, and I think that you called it right so many times on this podcast. But one of the things that you just said, which really resonates with me, is a lot of people think of Gen AI as chatbots still, and it's unfortunate because ChatGPT was such a popular Gen AI application, but people see it as synonymous: LLMs, Gen AI, chatbots, like they think it's all one and the same. And I think that some of the biggest value add is on the other areas that we've been talking through, which is structuring data from things like documents, information retrieval from databases and unstructured documents, which is RAG, of course. I think that one is at least popular. Decision making, right? That's critical. Most of our lives, like in white collar office roles, is about retrieving information with that context and making a decision ultimately to go and enable something, whether it's claims processing that you do to pay out a claim, or it could be underwriting for all different types of underwriting decisions. It could be account opening decisions that you're making. I mean, just a constant series of decisions. And the better uses of AI, Gen AI in particular, is around enabling some automated decisioning. So the people in these roles don't have to make the easy decisions anymore. Right? The easy decisions it's just automatically made, and they're working on the more complex use cases.
Yeah,
And so they actually end up being more productive, more value add to the organization. And actually, work becomes more fun for them, which is the big unlock that we see that Gen AI is going to be able to introduce as part of the future for work.
Agreed completely,
Yeah.
completely. And it's funny the way we introduce a lot of times, and it starts with chatbots, right? But the way we introduce it to, our teams is often that they're not here to replace anything that you're doing today. It's never going to replace you. But what it's going to do is, like you said, unlocks a great word. It's just going to unlock the opportunity for you to be more, right? It's unlock the opportunity for you to use, the smart person that you are and apply that to the bigger problems, more time with customers, even, improve the organization. Let's get this little stuff. Let's let that get handled in the appropriate fashion and get done. Yeah. I mean, it's a great word, unlock, when it comes to that.
Well, Thomas, it's been a pleasure having you on the show. Where can people learn more about you and Ellis Mortgage? We'll make sure to include that in the show notes.
Yeah, Lone Stream Mortgage is part of OCMBC.com. So OCMBC is our main organization. Lone Stream, you can visit us on the web at LoneStreamWholesale.com. Mainly 95% wholesale lender. With a lot of other opportunities kind of coming out of divisions within our organization. So you can find me on LinkedIn. So if you'd like to connect, please feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. I think I'm under Tom Shaw as my URL. So.
Incredible. Well, very excited to chat with you next year, a year from now, to see where you've landed with even more of the Gen AI applications. But really, thank you for being on the show. It's been a pleasure.
Great talking with you. Thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure.